in 2 Samuel chapter 5, where we are, David has been made king of all Israel. The nation is united together with one king ruling all of them, all 12 tribes of Israel. Remember, there were 12 sons of Jacob. Jacob was the one who wrestled with God, personally, physically wrestled with God. It was Jacob who was renamed Israel after this fight. After this wrestling session that lasted all night. Jacob is the man whom we get the word Israel from, and it was Jacob that had 12 sons, and over time, over the next 500 or 600, 700 years, those sons would form the 12 tribes of Israel. The 12 names of Jacob's or Israel's sons make up the 12 tribes of Israel. And here, David has control over the united nation of Israel, all 12 tribes living in unity, living in harmony with one another. In 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 3, it says, "So all the elders of Israel came to the king," this is David, "at Hebron, and King David made a covenant with them before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel." David was 30 years old when he became king. He reigned 40 years. That's a long reign. Our presidents last 4 years, 8, if they're really good and we re-elect them. Imagine some of these kings of Israel and Judah, when you go into the histories in 1 Kings and 2 Kings, some of them reigned, I think the highest reign was 51 years. Imagine that, all your life being the king, being the one that the nation looks to for guidance. David reigned for 40 years. At Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months. That was over one tribe, only the tribe of Judah. And in Jerusalem, he reigned for 33 years over all Israel, over all 12 united tribes and Judah. And we have been looking at Jerusalem. We're done with that, but I just want to show you here in verse 6 that David establishes a capital city for the nation of Israel, and this is the capital city. Now the king and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, and they said to David, so his troops go to Jerusalem to make war against that city, because David wants that city for his capital. The people that live there are called Jebusites. The ancient name of this city was Jebus. And so when David's men arrived there, the men of Jebus looked down, and this is how they taunted the armies of the living God, David's men. The Jebusites said, "You shall not come in here to Jerusalem, but the blind and the lame will turn you away," thinking David cannot enter here. So the Jebusites say, "We could send our lame and our blind to the wall. They could defend us from your army, great David. We're not afraid of you." In verse 7, God has other plans. It says, "Nevertheless, even with this big language of the lame and the blind could defeat you," in verse 7, nevertheless, it says, David captured the stronghold of Zion. Yes, he did. Yes, he did, very simply. That is the city of David. So God sets up his eternal capital city here and his worship site, the city of Jerusalem, and man will forever come to worship God in Jerusalem, either the present Jerusalem or the new Jerusalem that we talked about last time. I want to say one thing about Zion. Tzion, T-S-I-O-N is the Hebrew pronunciation, Tzion. But the city of Zion is very technically the city of David. I'll show you a map in just a minute, but it's that little thumb that comes out that David initially took. It's not the Temple Mount where Solomon would stretch out and build the temple up on Mount Moriah next door. It's that little city of David. That is technically Zion. But as you continue in the Old Testament, Zion, all of Jerusalem will eventually be considered Zion. I just want you to see that and don't get confused that here Zion is very technically this little thumb, the city of David, but eventually over time all of the city of Jerusalem would be known as Zion, the city of God, the mountain of God, the city of David, all these different titles, same city, the city of Jerusalem. Verse 8 gives us some background concerning the words of David to his men when they were leading up to this conflict against Zion. How are we going to take this city that the Jebusites hold? Well, David issues a challenge to his men. He hasn't taken the city yet. This backs up a step and says, yes, David took the stronghold. He captured the stronghold of Zion. But as a matter of interest, in verse 8, it says, let me tell you something David did when he was going up to Zion. And that's what verse 8 is. And verse 8 says, David said on that day, when they're going to capture Zion, this is David's challenge to his men, whoever would strike the Jebusites, let him reach the lame and the blind. He throws their statement back at him. You think the lame and the blind can defend your city from me? I'll throw that word back at you. You're lame and the blind. Let whoever can get into the city, let him reach the lame and the blind who are hated by David's soul through the water tunnel. And therefore the challenge was accepted. And the men, he repeats again, the men of Jebus have said, the blind and the lame shall not come in, or the blind and the lame shall not come into the house. I wish the map was up. It's not up yet. I'll show it to you in just a minute. But let me tell you this about what's going on here. Why are the Jebusites so convinced that they can defend this city against David and Yahweh, David's king, David's God, and all the people of Israel? It's because this city has been under the control of the Jebusites for centuries now. Going all the way back to the days of Joshua, when Joshua led Israel across the Jordan River. Remember, he went to Jericho, the walls fell down. He went to Bethel, he went to Ai, and they defeated people in battle. Joshua makes his charge into Israel. He cuts the head of the snake off. He kills all the influential kings all around the land of Israel. But there were some people that he couldn't conquer. There were some people that the faith of Israel was not enough, and they didn't trust Yahweh enough, and they left certain cities in the control of the Gentiles, the pagans, whom they should have run out. Remember, God told Joshua and all the people with him, when you go into the land of Canaan, kill everything that breathes. I'm purifying the land of pagan idolatry. I don't want anything there that won't worship me. That's the statement. I don't want anything to live in this land that won't worship me and only me. And everybody there, for 400 years I've been patient with the Amorites, the Canaanites. I've waited since the days I sent Israel into Egypt. I've waited 400 years for these people to turn to me. They have not. They are entrenched in their non-God worship. They worship satanic false gods, and I'm done with it. So he tells Joshua, you go in there and you kill everything that breathes. I'm purifying the land of Canaan. Interesting, you say, man, that sounds really harsh. Anybody think that sounds really mean of God? When Jesus comes back on the white horse in Revelation chapter 19, in the campaigns we like to call Armageddon, what is he going to do to the land? He's going to purify it. How's he going to do that? He's going to kill everything that breathes that doesn't worship Yahweh only. With the sword that proceeds from his mouth, that's exactly what Jesus is coming back to do. What Joshua and the people of Israel would not do, Jesus is coming back to do. Because he won't rule Jerusalem and Israel from a land of idolatry. He's purifying the land. It's exactly what Joshua was supposed to do. They couldn't get it done. So the Jebusites have had control of this city since the days of Joshua. Who's David? You're just another guy who shows up at our city wall thinking that you, Jewish David, are going to topple us today. You're not going to do it. We could send the lame and the blind out. For 500 years we've been telling you people this. You can't take our city. In Joshua 15, verse 63, this is what it says. Now as for the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, before it was called Jerusalem, it was called Jebus, it was their city. And it says, as for the Jebusites, the inhabitants of what we call the modern day Jerusalem, the sons of Judah could not drive them out. That wasn't God's problem. God could have driven them out, but the sons of Judah wouldn't fight hard enough. They lacked trust in God to give them the victory. Remember the giants in the land and the strong fortified cities? Jabez was one of those strong fortified cities that they were afraid to march against. The sons of Judah could not drive the Jebusites out, so the Jebusites lived with the sons of Judah at Jerusalem until this day, until the writing of that book, Joshua's book, and on into the future. For hundreds of years, the Jebusites have owned this city, and the Jews have not been able to take it. That's why they're so confident when David shows up. We own this city, and we've owned it forever. You're not going to take this city. So David issues a challenge to his men. We've been here before. The Jews have been at the gates of Jebus before, trying to take this city. We've not been able to do it. But anyone who can get through the water tunnel, the Gihon Spring, anyone who can enter into the city through the water tunnel and take that city, I will make the chief. Look what he says in 1 Chronicles, which pictures or mirrors 2 Samuel. Let me say that again. 2 Samuel is a book all about David, King David's reign in Israel. 1 Chronicles is also a book all about King David's reign in Israel. They are mirror books. The difference in the history is that 2 Kings talks about David politically. 1 Chronicles talks about David spiritually. 1 Chronicles is a book from the priestly perspective, what was going on in Israel with the worship of Yahweh. 1 Kings is looking at what was going on politically in Israel. 1 Chronicles says, I'm not interested as much in the politics. I want to know how they were worshiping Yahweh. So 1 Chronicles speaks a lot about the temple, the preparations for the temple, the singers, the gatekeepers, all about the temple, all about spiritual worship in Israel. In 1 Chronicles chapter 11, verse 6, this is said about this event where David wants to take Jerusalem. It says, now David had said, and this is the challenge, whoever strikes down a Jebusite first, here's the challenge, shall be chief and commander. Remember what the name of David's military commander was? It's his nephew. His name is Joab, J-O-A-B, Joab, Joab. Remember, Joab is the one who killed Abner, the northern commander, murdered Abner. Joab has had a long standing with David. David can't control this wild nephew of his, Joab. He must be a very fierce man, a man of battle, a wonderful military commander, but he's also a murderer, and David can't control him. I wonder here if David is saying, is there anyone out here who can topple my nephew who is easier to work with than my nephew? I wonder if a part of this wasn't that, because David issues a challenge. Anybody who can strike down a Jebusite first shall take over as chief and commander of the army. Like I said, I wonder if this is David trying to get out from under the punishment that was owed his nephew Joab, but he couldn't do it directly. But it kind of backfires on David, because who's the man that got it done? It's his nephew Joab that got it done. It says Joab, the son of Zeruiah, that's David's sister, Zeruiah, he's the one that went up first, so he became the chief. He was already the chief of David's army, but now he becomes the chief of the entire nation of Israel's army. So plan kind of backfired on David. Verse 9 says, so David lived in the stronghold. He takes it. Jebus is now renamed Jerusalem, and it's David's city. The city of David, it's called Jerusalem. So David lived in the stronghold and called it the city of David, and David built all around from the Millo and inward. Now, that word Millo is a Hebrew word. It's not translated into English. They didn't know how to translate it. The word actually means filling. You know, like you take a donut that's hollow and you put a tube in it, and you go quick, and you fill it up with Bavarian cream, my favorite. I can dream. As a diabetic, I can only dream. But that's what the word Millo means. It's a filling. And remember here when you talk about David's city that it was surrounded by valleys. You've got the Central Valley, the Tyropoeon Valley on one side. You've got the Kidron Valley on the east side. Up here in the north, in this whole area right here, you've got a depression until it goes up the hill to go to Mount Moriah. Here's another picture of it. So this idea of the Millo, what was this? But it's a filling. David bringing in dirt, bringing in earth, bringing in rock to fill in these empty spaces right here and develop this whole area called the Ophel. I'm sure he had to do some of that all around. Had to terrace the land, strengthen the land, and build it up. But certainly in the Central Valley, that thing was almost completely filled up. It's almost not even a depression anymore. Over the thousands of years that have gone on. Gihon Springs, I just want to talk about this for just a second. You know, when you talk about a city on a hill, on a mountaintop, which is what this is, Jerusalem, you've got to have a water source. And there are no rivers flowing around Jerusalem. But God, in His omniscience, put a wonderful cold water spring right under the city of David, and it's called the Gihon Spring, and this is the water that waters all of Jerusalem. It's natural spring water, and there it is. This is the tunnel through which Joab would have gone in, the water tunnel, to get under the city, to go up through the water pipes, the ducts that they had for water, and go in from the inside and destroy the Jebusites. I guess no one had ever tried it. No one was ever brave enough to do it, except for David's nephew. David had the plan, going through the water tunnel. Joab had the guts to get it done. So he becomes, for the next 35 years, David's commander of the army. Have anybody ever heard of Hezekiah's tunnel? When King Hezekiah, who won't come along for hundreds of years, David's in 1000 BC, Hezekiah's late 700, 720 BC, so 300 years later. The armies of Assyria would march on Jerusalem. It's a fascinating account. The armies of Sennacherib would march on Jerusalem and they would cut off their water supply. And so what Hezekiah did was had two different groups of men. I should bring you a map of it sometime. One of them started here at the spring, and the other one started way over here somewhere. And through the hill that is Mount Moriah, they chiseled out a tunnel. I could show you a picture of myself in Hezekiah's tunnel. It's about this wide, about 18 inches to 2 feet wide at its widest. And in its shortest, it's about this tall. So we were going through there all with our headlamps and our water shoes on, ducked down walking through this, except for my little friend Laura, who was on the tour with us. She's only that tall. And I took a great picture of Laura standing straight up where nobody else could. Walls about that tall. Hezekiah's tunnel. The miracle is that with no seismographic information, no sonar, no radar, no way to look into that mountain, this side made this zigzaggy curve and ended up meeting this side, making this zigzaggy curve just exactly on point. Two people met each other in the middle of a mountain, underground, 30 or 40 feet. They had no business meeting each other, but yet God would water the Temple Mount and the city of Zion while they were under siege by Hezekiah's tunnel. It was an underground water viaduct. That's what it was. Fabulous the way God takes care of His city and His people Israel. Hezekiah's tunnel, one of the greatest miracles that God ever did for Israel. Read that, Google it, Hezekiah's tunnel. You can go check it out. So David makes the Millo here. It says David lived in the stronghold. He called it the city of David. David built all around from the Millo and inward. And here we see all these pictures of David's Jerusalem. Now this is not David's Jerusalem. This is Solomon's Jerusalem. David's Jerusalem stopped right here. I should be doing this over there. All of this Temple Mount was added by Solomon. David's son, who would also reign for 40 years. Verse 10 says, David became greater and greater. The Lord God of hosts was with him. Yahweh, the Creator, the only God, was with David. And David is growing in influence. He's growing in stature. He's growing in power and authority, not only in Israel, but around the world. And in verse 11, we see indication of David's worldwide, international esteem. Look what it says in verse 11. Then Hiram, the king of Tyre, sent messengers to David. He sent cedar trees and carpenters and stonemasons, and they built a house for David. So Tyre is up here a little bit north of Israel. Jerusalem, let's see if I can do this. Jerusalem is right here, right in the middle. Here's Tyre up here on the Mediterranean coast. Now there's a king in Tyre. He's not Jewish. His name is Hiram. He's a Gentile. Again, this area of Asher right there, the coastal areas of Tyre and Sidon up above it, these areas were never taken over by Israel the way they should have been. They are still in Gentile control, just like the land of the Philistines down here is in Gentile control. Just because it looks like Israel doesn't mean Israel controlled every ounce of the dirt. They never did. They still don't. And they won't until Jesus Christ comes back and purifies the land. But from this city of Tyre, you've got a man named Hiram who's the king of that city, the king of those people. He hears that David has united the kingdom again after this 7.5-year split, and Hiram immediately sends David provisions. Not only does he send him cedar trees from Lebanon, that's modern day Lebanon, by the way. Not only does he send him cedar trees, but he sends him men to work. He sends an entourage of workmen into Jerusalem to build King David a palace. Now that's influence. Let me tell you something about Tyre. It was a Phoenician city-state. They were seagoing peoples. It was the most important port city on all of the ancient Mediterranean Sea. This was the most important port city in all of the Mediterranean. Hiram, the king at this time, has made long-distance trade possible. He's going to faraway countries, bringing back gold, bringing back spices. I mean, he is running the maritime trade industry in all of the Mediterranean Sea. King Hiram runs this town. What he understands, though, is that he runs the maritime trade from Tyre. What he needs is also the land-based trade. He's a waterman. He's a seaman. And he needs the land of Canaan because all of the trade routes, the camel routes, went through the land of Canaan. So Hiram, in a very wonderful political move, understands that he needs David's cooperation so that all this trade he's bringing in from all over the Mediterranean Sea, all this trade he's bringing to the port city of Tyre, now needs to spread across land, and I need the land of Canaan to do that because everything goes through the land of Canaan. I'll put a little red box up here to show you where Jerusalem is. It's right in the center of all the trade routes of the Middle East. It's still right in the center of all of the trade routes in the Middle East. That's why countries and nations and empires have fought to control Jerusalem for for thousands of years. It is a hub of everything that goes through that part of the world. And so Hiram knows, I need David's cooperation to send my maritime goods out throughout the land, into the Fertile Crescent, into Assyria, into Babylonia, down to Egypt, into Africa. I need the land of Canaan. I need to be able to move trade through there. I'm going to make David a palace. It's a brilliant man, brilliant stroke. This trade alliance, I just want to show you that this trade alliance that Hiram started goes well into the days of King Solomon. Look what this very same king would do 30 years later. David is in Jerusalem. He'll reign from Jerusalem for 33 years. After that, his son Solomon takes over the reign. Hiram is still the king. And it says, this very same king in 1 Kings 5, says, now Hiram, king of Tyre, sent his servants to Solomon when he heard that they had anointed him king in place of his father David. For Hiram had always been a friend of David. Look what it says in verse 5. It says, behold, I intend to build a house for the name of the Lord my God. What do we call that house? What is that? Solomon is telling Hiram, listen, I'm glad we're in communication. I know you were always my father's friend. I know you supplied Israel with supplies. Like they were Israel's best buy. They were Israel's Lowe's. The best materials, the best lumber in the world came from the trees of Lebanon. Solomon knew it, the wisest man that ever walked. So Solomon says, I intend to build a house for the name of Yahweh my God. What's the name of that house? It's called the temple. What wood does Solomon use to build God's temple in Jerusalem? He uses Lebanese wood. He uses Hiram's wood. He says, I intend to build a house for the Lord, as the Lord spoke to David my father, saying, your son, whom I will set on your throne in your place, he will build the house for my name. So Solomon says, here I am, David's son. I've been set on David's throne. I intend to build a house. I intend to build the holy temple for Yahweh, the God of the universe. And the next verse says, now therefore, Solomon telling Hiram, command that they cut for me cedars from Lebanon. And my servants will be with your servants. And I will give you wages for your servants according to all that you say. Name your price. You've got the finest goods in the world. Name your price. Once upon a time you sent your cedars down. My father made a magnificent palace with your wood, with your carpenters and your stonemasons. I want them all back. I want your wood. I want your workmen. They're the best in the world. Don't we know certain things to be the best in the world? Certain products are the best when they come from certain countries. We know that. We talk about, well, now I'm drawing a blank. But we talk about items and we say they're the best in the world. You know, you want to talk about, right, I'll just give you a typical item, something like an automobile. A car, we might say, well, the best, longest lasting, most dependable cars come from what country? Somebody said Germany, and I might agree with that 50 years ago. But now they come from Japan. They're Japanese. They're not Benzes and Beamers anymore. They're Japanese. Japanese make fantastic, long-lasting, reliable automobiles. You want to buy silk for a suit? Where do you shop? You shop in Italy. You go buy Italian silk because the Italians weave the finest silk in the world. There are certain things that are the best on the globe. And in the days of Solomon, the wisest man in the world knew, you want the best wood for building, you go to Lebanon and you get cedar. You want the best masons, the best carpenters, you go to Lebanon, you get the boys from Lebanon. They're the best in the world at it. If you needed to build a barn, you had no nails, you only had hand saws because electricity had gone out and you needed to build a barn for your horses. What group of people are you going to call? There you go. You're going to call the Amish, and they're going to do it in a couple of days. They're going to build you a fantastic barn because they are the best on the globe at timber framing. Nobody can beat them. Hundreds of years ago, it was the Lebanese. It was the people from Tyre and Sidon. They were the Amish before the Amish were cool. So Solomon says, command that they cut for me cedars from Lebanon. My servants will work with your servants because I need your servants to come. They're the best. I'll give you wages for your servants according to all that you say. For you know, Hiram, and I know that there's no one among us who knows how to cut timber like the Sidonians. Tyre and Sidon, these cities, 7 or 8, 10 miles away, maybe it's 20, but they're very close to each other. Tyre and Sidon. In the Bible, you almost never hear one city mentioned without the other. It's usually Tyre and Sidon. The next verse says, when Hiram heard the words of Solomon, So Solomon makes this demand of Hiram, this at least request. And how does Hiram respond? He rejoiced greatly and he said, "Blessed be Yahweh today, who has given to David a wise son over this great people." So Hiram sent word, I don't know where verse 8 is, it should be there. So Hiram sent word to Solomon saying, "I have heard the message which you have sent me. I've heard your message, I've heard your request, and I will do what you desire concerning the cedar and the cypress." In the next verse, Hiram continues. He said, "My servants will bring them down from Lebanon to the sea." Remember, Hiram's a seaman. He's an old Phoenician. He's a seagoing man. So how is he going to bring that lumber across? With camels on wheels? Nope. I'm going to bring them on the sea. I know the water. So he said, "I'll bring them from Lebanon to the sea, and I'll make them into rafts to go by sea to the place where you direct me, and I'll have them broken up there, and you shall carry them away. You're the land man, I'm the water man. I'll get them to you the way I know how. Once they reach land, you're on your own, buddy, because you're the land man." I love the way the Bible shows that all these people in the Bible are human beings. They've got talents, they've got strengths and weaknesses. I love that they're just like you and me. If we were going to build something in this church, there would be certain people assigned to certain parts of the task. I would not be part of the planning committee, I assure you. But I'd work to cut and sweat and nail and do all the rest of it, but I'm not the planning guy. Someone else would have to do that. We all have strengths. Hiram and Solomon working together to build the temple of God. I think it's fascinating that God used wood from Gentile nations. He sourced Gentile woods to build his house. It's a fascination. Jesus is the Savior of not only the Jew, but the Gentile also. So Hiram says, "Then you shall accomplish my desire by giving food to my household." There was an exchange there. So Hiram gave Solomon as much as he desired of the cedar and cypress timber to build the holy temple of God. Very interesting. So this relationship that we see started here, this man Hiram, this seagoing Phoenician who knows I need trade routes in Israel, so I'm going to befriend David, this situation would go on for generations of people. Back to 2 Samuel chapter 5, David realized if a man like Hiram, who controls as much as Hiram controls in the world, he's in control of the most influential port in the world. If Hiram sends me wood and carpenters and stonemasons to build me a house, then I have arrived. God has exalted me and Israel in the eyes of the world. It says, and David realized, because of this gift from Hiram, that the Lord Yahweh had established him. Not only made him king of Israel, but established his kingdom, established his throne for all the world to see. David comes to realize that the Lord had established him as king over all Israel, and that God had exalted his kingdom. This is God's doing in exalting David's kingdom in the eyes of King Hiram, and he has exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people. It's one of the interesting things about David. David knew that Yahweh was Israel's real sovereign. If you would have asked David, who's the king of Israel? He would say, Yahweh is. Well, who's the under king? Well, that's me. But Yahweh is the sovereign king of Israel. David understood God's sovereign authority the way Saul never did. Saul thought he was the man, and it cost him everything. David understood, I work for my God, Yahweh, the sovereign of Israel. David understood that he had been made king for Israel's welfare, not for his own glory. A man after God's own heart, King David. So Hiram here, king of Tyre, very influential, established, wealthy, had reached out to David. And because he had done this, David is realizing that the world is finally taking notice of our little nation called Israel. Yahweh has achieved this for us. Yahweh has achieved this for Israel. Remember, one of the promises of God to Israel, I won't be able to go back early enough. But in Deuteronomy chapter 28, in verse 7, Deuteronomy 28, 7, it says, the Lord shall cause, if you're obedient to me and you follow the laws, the Moses laws, the Mosaic laws, if you're obedient, this will be Israel's, this will be your reality. Look what it says. The Lord shall cause your enemies who rise up against you to be defeated before you. Jerusalem says, David won't come here, the lame and the blind will take them away. What does God say? If you're obedient like David, the Lord shall cause your enemies who rise up against you to be defeated before you. They will come out against you one way, they will flee before you 7 ways. The Lord will command the blessing upon you in your barns and in all that you put your hand to, and He will bless you in the land which the Lord your God gives you. The Lord will establish you. And David realized that the Lord had established him. It was a promise of God for obedience. Deuteronomy 28:9 says, the Lord will establish you as a holy people to Himself, as He swore to you, if you keep the commandments of the Lord your God and walk in His ways. And that's what David was doing. He was keeping the Lord's commandments. He was walking in God's ways. And God was blessing him and establishing him in Israel. Deuteronomy 28:10 says, so all the peoples of the earth will see, like Hiram, the king of Tyre. So all the peoples of the earth will see that you, Israel, are called by the name of the Lord Yahweh, and they will be afraid of you. Here's Hiram with all his authority, his power, and his wealth, bowing before David with gifts. The bounty of the world, the fortunes of the world are coming into Israel. The golden age of Israel has begun. That's what I'm trying to get you to see. Israel has a very short, flash in the pan, golden age. And it has begun with David being established and the nations of the world bringing tribute to David in Jerusalem. 26 years ago, God promised David that you would have the kingdom. The kingship of Israel will be yours one day. 26 years have gone by, and David is finally firmly established as the king of Israel. 26 years he waited for this event. The golden age is here. Verse 13. What else happens in Israel, in Jerusalem now that it's established king? It says, well, meanwhile, David took more concubines and wives from Jerusalem. Is that a good thing in keeping with the Mosaic law, or is that sin to David? Deanna gives the thumbs down. That's bad. You say, wait a minute, David was doing so well. You said the golden age began. I didn't say a perfect man had come to earth. I said David was doing well. There's no perfection in humanity except for the God-man Jesus Christ. David took more wives and concubines and wives. This is not good. This is a negative. But God uses even our bad decisions. He can turn them around for good. I'll show you an example of that in just a minute. So he takes more concubines and more wives from Jerusalem after he came from Hebron, and more sons and daughters were born to David in the city of Jerusalem. I'll make this statement. Fortunately, God doesn't cut off all His blessings. Because His servants are less than perfect. Let me say it one more time. Fortunately, God doesn't cut off all His blessings because His people are less than perfect and fail Him from time to time. Because if that were the case, if God did cut off all His blessings for men's sins, we would have zero blessings, wouldn't we? Because we continue to walk in sin. So you see David here, you're saying, wait, that's wrong. The Mosaic law said one man, one woman united. What God has put together, let no man tear asunder. And I say, yeah, that's exactly what the law says. David wasn't a perfect man. David failed here. But thank goodness He's a perfect God. He's a God of patience. He's a God of forgiveness. He's a God that sees through our weaknesses. And then we have this list of names. Even while David is walking against God's law here, look at the names in verse 14. These are the names of those who were born to David in Jerusalem. Tell me why these names are important. Shammua, important? Nope. Shobab, important? Nope. I mean, not in the plan of God for history, but look at the next couple of names. Nathan. Of one of these wives that David took in Jerusalem, a new wife to him, one of their sons' names was Nathan. Is Nathan an important person in the line of David heading toward the man Jesus who would be born a Jew? Anybody know? I want you to write this down. We're not going to go to it, but in Luke chapter 3, there's a genealogy, a family tree of Jesus Christ. And you know who David's son is that this line goes through? It's Nathan. It's Nathan. David's son Nathan is the ancestor of Mary. Now listen to that again. David's son Nathan, who was born to him in Jerusalem, is Jesus' ancestor that Mary comes through. That was convoluted. Do you get that? David, Nathan, many generations later, a woman is born named Mary. Nathan is Mary's great 14 or 15 times uncle or grandfather. Mary is in the line of Nathan. Luke chapter 3 shows David's lineage through Nathan all the way to Mary, and obviously then genetically to the Lord Jesus Himself. Now look at the next line, the next name in the list. Then you get the name Solomon. Is he an important son? Obviously, he's the son that would become the king after David. But what else is important about Solomon? If you follow Solomon's line all the way down to Jesus' time, who do you get? In Matthew chapter 1, write this down, in Matthew chapter 1, there's another genealogy of Jesus. And when you get to David, instead of seeing the name Nathan after David, you see the name Solomon. So from David, you get one line through Nathan that goes to Mary, and through David you get another line through Solomon that goes to Joseph, who was at least thought to be the father of Jesus. We know that God the Holy Spirit was the father of Jesus. But both of these names, what I'm trying to tell you is the blessing of God. While David is in Jerusalem taking wives that he shouldn't have, God still brings blessing to David because He has to, because we're all sinners, and He still gives David the two sons that would one day become the Lord Jesus Christ. Nathan is Mary's grandfather, and Solomon is Joseph's grandfather. The line continues. Even in the sinful state, the blessings continue. What a God. What a gracious God. Verse 15, more sons, Ebar, Elishu, Nepheg, Yaphia. Verse 16, Elishama, Eliada, Eliephet. So Eliphelet, so he has more and more children. I think there are 19 by the end of David's collection of children. One daughter, at least one daughter, but he has all these sons, Nathan and Solomon being born to him in Jerusalem. Who was Solomon's mother? Who? Bathsheba was Solomon's mother. Blessing from cursing, you see, or blessing from sin. David should have had Bathsheba. You know the whole story. But again, even while man is unfaithful to God, God remains faithful to man and keeps pushing His plan through. I've got to get, here's the bottom line. This is what this whole book is about. I have promised to get a deliverer to earth to save mankind from their sins. I have promised in the Garden of Eden to the first man Adam, to his wife Eve, and to the serpent Satan, the deceiver, I have promised that one day a deliverer will come to earth. And the whole Bible up to the book of Matthew is a show of God bringing that promise to earth. God is doing it through the person of David. King David's grandson is named Jesus, through his son Nathan and through his son Solomon. Jesus was born to royal parents. Mary was a blue blood. You wouldn't have thought it to know Mary in the days in which she lived, because Israel was in disobedience. She wasn't living in a palace. She was a poor woman. Joseph was living in a palace, even though he could directly trace his lineage to the king of Israel, King Solomon. And Joseph is a carpenter living as a common man. But they had royal blood. They were of royal lineage. Both of them were of the kingdom of David. But by the time Jesus came along, you wouldn't know it. God's blessing to bring Jesus in through these two people. This is the end of another section. In 2 Samuel, I told you the first 20 chapters are divided into 4 units. This is the end of a unit. Each of the unit ends with a list of names. We just saw a list of names. In chapter 3, verse 5, we saw David's son born in Hebron. In 5 verse 16, the verse we're in right now, we see David's sons born in Jerusalem. So in 5:17, we're going to start a new section of this chapter, of this book. And at the end of this, in 3 chapters, we'll see a list of David's officials. What we're about to go into is David's military victories. Military victories over largely the Philistines and over other peoples. David will start to purge the land of people that Joshua couldn't. And we'll see military victory after military victory. In chapter 8, verse 18, we'll see David's officials listed. And then we'll go on to the end. And in the last section, we'll see David's officials listed in chapter 20. Just to show you, this is the end of this second section. 5:17 starts a new section, and it talks about military victories for David and Israel. Just to get into it quickly, just for a minute, verse 17. It says, when the Philistines heard that they had anointed David king over Israel, all the Philistines went up to seek David, not for good, for evil. They wanted to destroy David. And when David heard of it, he went down to the stronghold. Now, remember with me that when David was only king over Judah, the one tribe, for 7.5 years in Hebron, the Philistines didn't give David any trouble at all. Probably thought that they were still friends with David. But now that David has become king over all of Israel, all 12 tribes, David has become their mortal enemy, and they march against David to kill him. They probably thought, though, before in that 7.5 years, that David was still friendly to them. He wasn't. But they probably thought he was. Let me backdate you into 1 Samuel chapter 27. Look at the past. Look at David's past relationship with the Philistines. I want to show you first, before we can understand David's current situation with the Philistines. They used to love David because David had them all snowed. Remember in 1 Samuel 27:1, David said to himself, "Now I will perish one day by the hand of Saul." David's father-in-law is Saul. Saul wants David killed. He's very jealous of David. Saul has promised over and over, you're more righteous than me. I'm going to stop chasing you. I'm sorry for what I've done. You're safe with me. David realizes that's just lip service. This guy, every opportunity he gets, I don't care what comes out of his mouth. I don't care what promises he makes. He will turn on me again. So David decides the only place I can go from my father-in-law Saul to be safe is into enemy territory. Imagine that. He says, there's nothing better for me than to escape into the land of the Philistines. Saul will then despair of searching for me anymore in all the territory of Israel, and I will escape from his hands. How long had David been in the land of the Philistines? The next verse says, the number of days that David lived in the country of the Philistines was 1 year and 4 months. So for almost 1.5 years, David flees to the land of Philistia. And he gets the king there, Achish. He gets this king completely snowed. Remember the story, thinking, oh, I'm here, I'm loyal to you. I've walked away, I've deserted King Saul. He's an evil man. Israel is bad. I'm here as a friend to the Philistines. He was not. But he made the king think he was. You go a couple of chapters later, David's there for a year and 4 months. They go into battle against Israel in 1 Samuel chapter 29. This is what's said. The commanders of the Philistines, they see David marching in battle with them. They're going up north to fight the Jews, and they look in their army and they say, what is a Jew doing in our army? We're going to defeat Jews, and you've got a Jew marching with us. Remember that story? So the commanders of the Philistines say, what are these Jews doing here, these Hebrews? And Achish, the one who David had completely snowed, Achish, the commanders, said to the commanders of the Philistines, is this not David, the servant of Saul, the king of Israel, who has been with me these days? Or rather these years, a year and a half? I have found no fault in David from the day he deserted me to this day. It's safe that David is with us. David will fight with the Philistines. That's what Achish is saying. The commanders won't have anything of it. They tell Achish David must leave. So Achish replies to David, listen to what the king of the Philistines, one of the cities, says to David. I know that you are pleasing in my sight like an angel of God. David had this man completely convinced that they were friends. David was no friend of the Philistines, never was, not for a moment. But in hiding himself from his father-in-law Saul, he's telling lie after lie to get the Philistine guy, Achish, to think we're buddies. And the Achish, the Philistine guy, bought it all. I know that you're pleasing in my sight like an angel of God. Nevertheless, the commanders of the Philistines have said, he must not go up with us into battle. So Achish tells David, arise early in the morning with the servants of your Lord who have come with you, and as soon as you've arisen early in the morning and have light, depart. They are friendly. I showed you those verses to tell you David and the Philistines are friendly for a year and 4 months. David goes back into Israel to Hebron. He takes over as king of Judah for 7.5 years, and the Philistines are still friendly. But all that changes the day that Israel gives David control over all 12 tribes, and all of a sudden the Philistines come against David and say, you must die, you and all the Jews with you. You've got to be gone. So again, a year and a half David lived with them. They were all friendly. 7.5 years David is king of Hebron, or king from Hebron of Judah. They were all friendly. But now that David has taken over the entire land of Israel, the Philistines march on David and say, we've got to stop this. We've got to destroy the king. Oh, I've got no time. I really want to show you something. Just can't do it. Let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for today.